I died on a winter night when I was 16 years old. Not physically, though I came close. I died the moment I heard my mother's voice through a hospital phone speaker telling a nurse to let me stay on life support, but not to waste money on surgery because her daughter's insurance had expired and she couldn't leave her party. The cameras were still rolling at my sister's bachelorette bash, you see, and appearances mattered more than whether I took my next breath. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Before I tell you how I survived and how they all paid for what they did, I need you to understand something. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever felt invisible in your own family or used by people who should love you, please hit that like button and subscribe. Your support means everything, and I promise this story has a message you need to hear. Drop a comment telling me if you've ever felt like the unwanted one. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. My name is Elizabeth Hale, and for the first 16 years of my life, I genuinely believed I deserved to be treated like hired help in my own home. It's strange how children normalize abuse when it's all they've ever known. I grew up in a massive estate in the Hamptons, the kind of place that gets featured in Architectural Digest with its sweeping ocean views and manicured gardens that require a team of landscapers. But I never felt like I belonged there. While my older sister Vanessa got the master suite on the second floor, with the balcony overlooking the water, I had a converted storage room near the kitchen. No natural light, no lock on the door, just a narrow bed and a dresser that didn't quite close properly. Eleanor. My mother made it clear from my earliest memories that I was different from Vanessa. Where my sister was celebrated for every minor achievement, I was expected to be grateful for the roof over my head. I learned to cook at age 7 because Eleanor fired our housekeeper and decided I could handle basic meals. I learned to do laundry at 8 because Vanessa complained that the dry cleaning service wasn't fast enough. By the time I was 12, I was managing the household accounts because Eleanor was too busy with her social calendar and Vanessa was too precious to sully her hands with something as mundane as bills. I never questioned it. That's the insidious thing about this kind of treatment. When everyone around you agrees that you're less important, you start to believe it. Eleanor would introduce Vanessa at parties with glowing pride. My sister was at Dalton, then she was preparing for Vassar, always destined for greatness. When people asked about me, Eleanor would wave her hand dismissively and say something like Elizabeth helps around the house. She's very useful, as if I were an appliance rather than her daughter. My father died when I was 5. I have almost no memories of him, except a vague sense of warmth and the smell of his cologne. After he was gone, Eleanor's treatment of me shifted from mere indifference to something actively hostile. Years later, I would learn why, but at the time I just thought I reminded her of something painful, and that was my fault too. The real toxicity intensified as Vanessa got older and more demanding. My sister wasn't born cruel. She was made that way by a mother who taught her that some people exist to serve and others to be served. By the time she was in high school, Vanessa had perfected the art of the cutting remark. She'd borrow my clothes without asking and return them stained or torn, then laugh when I got upset. She'd eat the dinner I'd spent hours preparing and complain that it was underseasoned, making me remake it while she watched television. She'd invite her friends over and introduce me as our maid when I was literally her sister. Her friends would laugh and I would force a smile like it was all a joke, even as something inside me shriveled a little more each time. But I endured. I told myself it would get better. I told myself that if I just tried harder, was more helpful, more invisible, more perfect, maybe Eleanor would see me. Maybe she'd love me, the way she loved Vanessa. I aced my classes at the public school I attended, while Vanessa went to private school. I won academic awards that Eleanor never attended ceremonies for. I volunteered at the local library and animal shelter trying to become someone worthy of affection. None of it mattered. I was still just the help. Then came the winter of Vanessa's engagement. My sister was 23 and had managed to snag Marcus Wellington, the son of a prominent political family in Connecticut. It was the social coup Eleanor had been orchestrating for years. The wedding was planned with the precision of a military operation, and the budget of a small nation. Everything had to be perfect. Everything had to be exactly as Eleanor and Vanessa envisioned, because this was their moment to shine before all of high society. The weeks leading up to the wedding were hell. I was working essentially as an unpaid wedding planner coordinator and personal assistant. I managed RSVPs, coordinated with vendors, handled Vanessa's increasingly unhinged demands about flower arrangements and seating charts. I did all of this while still maintaining the house cooking meals and trying to keep up with my schoolwork. I was getting maybe 4 hours of sleep a night. My hands were raw from all the housework. I'd lost weight because I forgot to eat. But every time I thought about complaining, Eleanor would remind me that this was my contribution to the family, the least I could do after everything they'd done for me. The day before the wedding, a massive winter storm was predicted to hit the Hamptons. Eleanor was in full panic mode because Vanessa's custom Vera Wang Yonkan was still at the boutique in Manhattan. The bridal shop had offered to deliver it the next morning with a rush fee of $500. Eleanor refused. She said it was highway robbery and she wasn't about to be taken advantage of by greedy vendors. Instead, she turned to me. I was in the kitchen preparing lunch when she stormed in, her face tight with that particular expression that meant I was about to receive an impossible task. "Elizabeth," she said, not even looking at me directly, "you need to go pick up Vanessa's dress, right now, before the storm hits." I looked outside at the already darkening sky. "Mum," I said, and using that word always felt strange in my mouth, awkward and unearned. "The weather reports say the storm is starting in a few hours. Maybe we should just pay for the delivery." Eleanor's eyes went cold. That was the look that used to make me want to disappear into the walls. "Do you have any idea how much this wedding costs? Do you have any concept of the sacrifices we've made? And you're worried about a little snow. You'll take the old Volvo and you'll go get that dress. If anything happens to it, if there's one drop of water, one wrinkle, one thread out of place, don't bother coming back. Do you understand me?" I understood. I always understood. I was 16 years old and I was being sent on a 4-hour round trip in a car that probably shouldn't have been on the road, even in good weather, to save $500 for a wedding that was costing close to $500,000. But I didn't argue. I never argued. I just nodded and grabbed the keys. The drive into Manhattan was tense but manageable. The sky was heavy and grey and a few snowflakes were starting to fall, but the roads were still clear. I picked up the dress, which was wrapped in layers of protective covering, and placed in a special garment box. The boutique manager made me sign about 6 different forms, acknowledging that I was responsible for its safety. The gown had cost $45,000, more than most people spend on a car. I placed it carefully in the passenger seat, buckled it in like it was a person, and started the drive back. The storm hit when I was about halfway home. It came fast, the way winter storms sometimes do on the coast. One moment there was a light snow, and the next moment visibility dropped to almost nothing. The wind picked up, pushing the old Volvo around on the highway. My hands were clenched so tight on the steering wheel that my knuckles were white. I was driving maybe 30 miles an hour on a highway where the speed limit was 55, my heart pounding, praying that I'd make it home safely. I didn't see the semi-truck until it was almost too late. It came out of nowhere, jackknifed across 2 lanes, the driver having lost control on black ice. I had maybe 2 seconds to react. My first instinct was to swerve left, which would have been the safest option for me. But the dress was on the passenger side. If I swerved left, I'd expose the passenger side to the impact. In that split second, with my brain running on pure panic, and 16 years of conditioning that I didn't matter, I jerked the wheel to the right instead, putting myself between the truck and Vanessa's precious gown. The physics of the crash are fuzzy in my memory. I remember the sound of metal screaming. I remember the world flipping, the horrible sensation of rolling glass shattering around me. I remember thinking absurdly, I hope the dress is okay. I remember pain, sharp and overwhelming. And then I remember nothing. I woke up in the ICU 3 days later. The first thing I saw was my Uncle Robert's face, a man I barely remembered from early childhood. He looked older than I expected, with grey threading through his dark hair, but his eyes were kind. When he saw me open my eyes, he grabbed my hand like I was something precious. "Lizzie," he said, and no one had called me Lizzie in years. Thank God you're awake." My throat was dry, and my head felt like it was splitting open. "What happened?" I tried to say, but my voice came out as barely a whisper. "You were in an accident," he said, "a bad one. You've been in a medically induced coma. You had bleeding on your brain and they had to operate. But you're going to be okay. You're going to be fine." Through the haze of pain medication and confusion, I processed this. Surgery. Brain surgery. That must have cost a fortune. "Where's Mum?" I asked, because even then, even after everything, some part of me expected her to be there. Some stupid, childish part of me thought that surely a mother would come when her daughter nearly died. Robert's face did something strange. His jaw tightened and his eyes went hard in a way that was almost frightening. "She's not here," he said carefully. "She's not going to be here. And that's actually something we need to talk about when you're feeling stronger." Over the next few days, as I slowly regained my strength, Robert told me everything. He told me about the phone call the hospital made to Eleanor trying to get consent for my emergency surgery. He told me how the nurse had called during Vanessa's bachelorette party, how Eleanor had been live streaming for her social media followers. And because she had the phone on speaker, possibly by accident, the nurse heard everything. Eleanor's actual words were worse than I could have imagined. "She's not dead yet, right?" Eleanor had said, her voice annoyed as if she'd been interrupted during something important. "Just keep her on the ventilator or whatever. I can't leave right now, we have photographers here. And anyway, I'm pretty sure her insurance lapsed last month. Don't do anything expensive." She paused and then added, "If she does die, call me after 11. The party should be done by then." The nurse had been so shocked that she recorded the rest of the conversation. That recording became evidence. Evidence that Robert, who I learned was my father's younger brother, used to file an emergency petition for custody. My uncle had been estranged from the family for over a decade after he'd reported my father for embezzlement from my grandfather's company. The family had closed ranks, called Robert a traitor, and cut him off. What they didn't know was that Robert had been right, and he'd spent the years since building his own fortune in real estate development. He wasn't the failed construction worker Eleanor had always described. He was worth more than my mother could imagine. When Robert heard about my accident, he came immediately. He authorised my surgery, stayed by my bedside for 3 days straight, and then he went to war. He hired the best lawyers in New York and filed for emergency guardianship. The evidence was damning. The recording of Eleanor's callousness. The fact that she never came to the hospital, not once, in those first critical 72 hours. The fact that she'd sent a minor out in dangerous weather conditions to run an errand that could have been easily solved with money she absolutely had. The court hearing happened while I was still in the hospital. Eleanor showed up, dressed in mourning black, playing the devastated mother for the judge. But Robert's lawyers tore her apart. They played the recording. They brought in the nurse as a witness. They showed my medical records documenting years of inadequate care, missed vaccinations, a broken arm when I was 12 that had healed wrong because Eleanor hadn't wanted to pay for a specialist. They painted a picture of systematic neglect and emotional abuse that was impossible to deny. The judge was a stern woman in her 60s who had apparently seen everything in her years on the bench, but even she looked appalled. She granted Robert full emergency guardianship and issued a restraining order. Eleanor was forbidden from coming within 100 feet of me. When Eleanor tried to protest, tried to perform her mother loves daughter act, the judge cut her off coldly. "Ma'am," the judge said, and I heard this from Robert later because I wasn't there. "I've reviewed the evidence and I've heard the recording. You are one of the most unfit parents I've encountered in my 20 years on this bench. Your daughter nearly died because of your negligence, and your response was to worry about your party. If there was a mechanism to fully terminate your parental rights immediately, I would do so. As it stands, you will not see this child, you will not contact this child, and if you violate this order, you will be arrested. Do I make myself clear?" Eleanor had apparently left the courthouse in a rage, already on her phone to her publicist trying to spin the story. But it was too late. Someone had leaked the audio recording to the press. By that evening, it was all over social media. The hashtag #unfitmother was trending. Eleanor's carefully curated image as a devoted single mother was destroyed in a matter of hours. Meanwhile, Vanessa's wedding was still scheduled to go forward. The Wellington family had apparently not heard about the scandal yet, or if they had, they were willing to overlook it for the sake of the alliance. The wedding was set for 2 weeks after my accident, and I was still in the hospital relearning how to walk without getting dizzy when it happened. Robert told me about it later with a grim satisfaction that I'd never seen in anyone before. The wedding was everything Eleanor and Vanessa had dreamed of. 300 guests, all of them from high society. The venue was decorated with thousands of white roses. Vanessa wore the Vera Wang dress that I'd nearly died to protect, which had ironically survived the crash completely undamaged while I had not. Everything was perfect for the first hour of the reception. Then the screen set up around the ballroom meant to display a slideshow of Vanessa and Marcus's relationship suddenly went black. And then they began to play something else. The audio recording of Eleanor's phone call. Every single word. "She's not dead yet, right? Just keep her on the ventilator. Don't do anything expensive." Over and over on a loop while 300 of the most influential people in New York society listened in growing horror. And then images began to appear on the screens, me unconscious in the ICU covered in tubes and bandages, medical reports detailing my injuries, the court order terminating Eleanor's custody, a timeline of the neglect. Everything laid bare for everyone to see. The reaction was immediate and catastrophic. Guests began leaving, people were taking out their phones, recording, posting to social media. Vanessa was screaming, trying to get someone to turn it off, but the AV system had been completely hijacked. Marcus's parents, the Wellingtons, took one look at what was unfolding and made a decision. Political families live and die by their reputations, and being associated with this level of scandal was unacceptable. Marcus's father walked onto the dance floor, took the microphone from the DJ, who had long since stopped playing music, and made an announcement. After careful consideration, he said, his voice carrying through the ballroom, "My family has decided we cannot, in good conscience, proceed with this union. We do not associate with people who treat children as disposable. This wedding is over. Marcus, we're leaving." Marcus, to his credit, or perhaps his cowardice, didn't even look at Vanessa. He just pulled off his wedding ring, set it on the nearest table, and followed his parents out. Other guests were already flooding toward the exits. Within 20 minutes, the ballroom was nearly empty, except for Eleanor, Vanessa, and a few confused catering staff. I learned all of this from news reports, because it was very thoroughly covered by the media. The hashtag #WeddingFromHell trended worldwide. Someone had recorded Marcus's father's announcement, and it went viral. Eleanor and Vanessa became social pariahs overnight. The brands that had sponsored various elements of the wedding all pulled their support and demanded their products back. Eleanor's social media accounts were flooded with hate comments. She had to make everything private and eventually deleted them entirely. The question everyone was asking was who had hacked the AV system at the wedding? Who had orchestrated that perfect, devastating takedown? Robert swore it wasn't him, and I believed him. My uncle was wealthy and connected, but this had the fingerprints of someone with even more power and resources. The answer came a month later when my grandfather, Judge Harrison Hale, showed up at the rehabilitation center where I was doing physical therapy. I'd met him only a handful of times in my life, always brief and formal encounters where he'd regard me with an inscrutable expression before leaving again. He was in his 70s, but still imposing with white hair and sharp eyes that seemed to see through any pretense. He walked into my room without knocking and sat down in the chair across from my bed. "Elizabeth," he said, "we need to talk." I was intimidated. This was a man who had been a federal judge who had presided over some of the most high-profile cases in New York legal history. "Hello, sir," I managed. "Your grandmother would have liked you," he said abruptly. "She always said there was something wrong in how your mother treated you. She wanted to intervene, but I told her to wait. I wanted to see if Eleanor would come to her senses on her own." His face hardened. "She didn't." If anything, she got worse. And when I heard that recording, when I understood how close I came to losing you because of her negligence, I decided enough was enough. It was you, I said, understanding suddenly. The wedding, you did that. He didn't deny it. I have friends in many fields, he said, including cybersecurity. Eleanor and your sister needed to understand that there are consequences for cruelty. They needed to understand that you are not nothing. You are my granddaughter, and you are under my protection. We talked for over an hour. He told me things I'd never known, about how my father had been troubled, had made bad choices, but had loved me deeply. About how Eleanor had married my father for money and status, not love. About how when my grandfather discovered my father's embezzlement, he'd given him a choice, face prosecution or leave the family. My father had chosen to leave, taking Eleanor and me with him, but he died in a car accident before they could really start over. Eleanor had crawled back to the family, but by then there was a rift. My grandfather had supported us financially, but at a distance, and Eleanor had resented every dollar. And then he told me about his wills, you will. I'm dying, he said matter-of-factly. Cancer. I have maybe 6 months, possibly less, and I've been thinking a great deal about legacy and what matters. So I'm telling you now what Eleanor will find out after I'm gone. Everything goes to you. The company shares, the real estate, the trust funds, all of it. Robert will manage it until you're 25, but it's yours. You're my heir, Elizabeth. You always should have been. I was speechless. I'd gone from having nothing, from being nothing, to being told I would inherit millions. Why me? I finally asked. Why not Vanessa? She's Eleanor's daughter too. He smiled, and it wasn't a kind smile. Vanessa is Eleanor's daughter in every way. Entitled, cruel, shallow. She would take what I built and squander it on herself. You, on the other hand, I've been watching you. Even when you had every reason to become bitter and selfish, you stayed kind. You volunteered, you helped others, you tried to earn love you should have received freely. That kind of character is rare. You'll use what I give you to do good in the world. That's why it's yours. He died 2 months later, peacefully in his sleep. The will reading was everything Robert had promised it would be. Eleanor and Vanessa showed up dressed in black, already counting their inheritance in their heads. They had been living off credit cards and rapidly depleting savings since the wedding disaster, as Eleanor's social media influencer income had dried up, and Vanessa couldn't find anyone willing to marry into the scandal. The lawyer read through the formalities and then got to the heart of it. To my daughter, Eleanor Hale, I leave the sum of 1 cent to remind her of the value of her moral character. Eleanor gasped like she'd been slapped. The lawyer continued. To my granddaughter, Vanessa Hale, I leave the sum of 1 cent to remind her that kindness cannot be bought. Vanessa started crying loud and dramatic. This isn't happening, she sobbed. This can't be legal. We're his family. The lawyer looked at her with absolutely no sympathy and continued. The entirety of my estate, including all shares in Hale Holdings, all real property, all financial assets and all personal effects, I leave to my granddaughter Elizabeth Margaret Hale to be held in trust and managed by her guardian Robert Hale until she reaches the age of 25. The number was staggering. My grandfather had been even wealthier than I'd understood. The estate was worth close to $50 million. I was 16 years old, and I'd just become one of the richest teenagers in America. Eleanor exploded. She started screaming about how I'd manipulated a dying old man, how I'd poisoned him against his real family, how she'd fight this in court for years if she had to. Robert stood up, and I saw him fully command a room for the first time. He was taller than I'd realised, and when he was angry, he was genuinely intimidating. You're done, Eleanor, he said coldly. You can try to fight the will, but it's airtight. My brother made sure of that. And if you try to drag Elizabeth through court, I will make it my mission to destroy you. I'll hire investigators to go through every penny you've ever spent, every tax return, every shady deal. I will find everything you've ever done wrong, and I will make sure you go to prison. Is that clear? Eleanor's lawyer whispered something to her. She looked at me with pure hatred. "You ungrateful little bitch," she hissed. "After everything I did for you. I gave you a home. I fed you. I clothed you. You made me your servant," I said, and it was the first time I'd ever really stood up to her. "You treated me like I was nothing. You sent me out in a storm, and I nearly died, and you didn't care. And now I'm free of you, and I have everything you ever wanted. And you have nothing." She tried to lunge at me, but Robert stepped between us. The lawyer threatened to call security. Eventually, Eleanor and Vanessa left, still screaming threats that everyone in the room knew were empty. The next 2 years were a strange mix of healing and learning. I finished high school through a private tutor because I couldn't face going back to my old school where everyone knew my story. I worked with a therapist who specialised in childhood trauma and family abuse. I learned words for what had happened to me: scapegoating, emotional neglect, financial exploitation, parentification. Understanding that I hadn't deserved any of it was the hardest part. Robert was patient. He helped me learn about the family business, about investments and real estate, and how to manage wealth responsibly. He encouraged me to think about what I wanted to do with my life beyond just existing. For the first time ever, I had choices. I could go to any college I wanted. I could travel. I could pursue any passion or interest. The world was suddenly wide open. I chose to focus on philanthropy. My grandfather had mentioned wanting me to do good with his money, and I took that seriously. I started a foundation focused on helping children in abusive or neglectful homes. I funded programs for family services, for therapy, for legal aid. I wanted to be for other kids what no one had been for me. On my 18th birthday, Robert threw me a small party. Just a few close friends I'd made through therapy group and online people who understood what I'd been through. We were in the penthouse of a building Robert owned overlooking Central Park, and I felt genuinely happy for the first time in my life. That evening, I was scheduled to give a speech at a charity gala, my first major public appearance as the head of the Hale Foundation. I was nervous, but also excited. This was my chance to step out from behind the story of being a victim and show who I was becoming. I didn't expect Eleanor and Vanessa to be there, but of course they were. They'd managed to get tickets somehow, probably by lying about their identities. I saw them as soon as I stepped up to the podium. They were sitting in the middle section dressed in their best clothes, which I could tell even from a distance weren't as nice as they used to be. Eleanor's face was harder, more lined. Vanessa had gained weight and lost the polished glow she used to maintain with expensive salon visits. I had two choices. I could have them removed, or I could face them. I chose to face them. I adjusted the microphone and looked directly at where they were sitting. "Good evening," I said, and my voice was steady. "My name is Elizabeth Hale, and 2 years ago I nearly died because my mother decided I wasn't worth saving. Some of you know this story. It was in the news. It went viral. It became a hashtag and a cautionary tale. But tonight, I'm not here to talk about the worst moment of my life. I'm here to talk about what came after." I saw Eleanor start to stand, probably ready to cause a scene. Robert, who was seated nearby, made a subtle gesture and 2 security guards moved into position. Eleanor saw them and sat back down, her face red with anger. I continued. "I'm here to announce the launch of the Hale Foundation's new initiative, a program that will provide legal assistance, counselling and financial support to children who are being abused or neglected by their families. Because I learned something important over the past 2 years. The people who share your blood aren't always your family. Family is the people who show up when you're dying. Family is the people who fight for you when you can't fight for yourself. Family is the people who see your value even when you can't see it yourself." There was applause. I let it fade before continuing. I also learned that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means understanding that what happened to you was wrong, and then choosing to use that knowledge to become stronger and to help others. It means setting boundaries and sticking to them. It means refusing to let cruel people make you cruel. Eleanor couldn't contain herself anymore. She stood up, and in the middle of this elegant ballroom, filled with New York society, she started yelling. "How dare you?" she screamed. "I'm your mother. I gave birth to you. You owe me everything. Everything you have should be mine. My father was supposed to leave that money to me, and you manipulated him. You turned him against his own daughter." The room went dead silent. Everyone was staring. I could see people pulling out their phones, starting to record. This was going to be another viral moment, but this time, I was ready for it. I looked at my mother, this woman who had made my childhood a nightmare, and I felt nothing but pity. "You didn't give birth to me because you wanted a daughter," I said calmly. "You gave birth to me because Vanessa needed a potential organ donor. That's what you told my grandfather. That's in the medical records my lawyers found. You had me tested for tissue compatibility before I was even a year old." The gasp that went through the ballroom was audible. Vanessa had gone white. Eleanor was shaking her head, but she couldn't deny it. It was true, and we both knew it. I continued. "You treated me like I was disposable because to you I was. I was an insurance policy for your precious firstborn. And when it turned out that Vanessa was healthy and didn't need my organs, I had no purpose. I was just an inconvenience. An extra mouth to feed. A child you could use for free labour." "Mum, please," Vanessa said, and for the first time she sounded uncertain. "Is that true?" I looked at my sister, this woman who had tormented me for years, and I saw something I'd never seen before. Doubt, fear, the realisation that maybe she'd never really known our mother at all. "Ask her yourself," I said, "but I think you already know the answer. You were the golden child, Vanessa. You could do no wrong. Everything was about you, for you to make you happy. Did you ever wonder why? Did you ever question why I was treated so differently? Or did you just accept that you deserved more because that's what she taught you?" Vanessa didn't answer. She was crying now, but they weren't the manipulative tears I was used to. These looked real. Eleanor grabbed her arm, trying to pull her toward the exit, but Vanessa shook her off. "Security," I said calmly. "Please escort these women out. They're trespassing, and if they try to contact me or come near me again, I want them arrested for violating the restraining order that is still in effect." The guards moved in. Eleanor was still screaming, still insisting that I was ungrateful, that I'd ruined her life, that I'd pay for this. But her voice got farther away, and then she was gone. The ballroom was buzzing with conversation. I could only imagine what would be on social media in the next hour. I took a breath and returned to my speech. "Where was I?" I said with a small smile. "Oh yes, the Hale Foundation. We've allocated $5 million in the first year to help children escape toxic family situations. Because every child deserves to be safe. Every child deserves to be loved. And every child deserves to know that they matter." The standing ovation that followed was overwhelming. People came up to me afterwards, some with tears in their eyes, telling me their own stories of family abuse and neglect, telling me how much the foundation would mean, telling me I was brave. I didn't feel brave. I just felt tired and relieved that it was over. That night, back at the penthouse, Robert poured us both a drink. He raised his glass. "To you, Lizzie," he said. "Your father would be so proud. I'm so proud." We clinked glasses, and I looked out over the city lights. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who slept in a storage room and believed she deserved nothing. That girl was gone. In her place was someone who knew her worth, who had boundaries, who had people who loved her for who she was and not what she could do for them. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I almost deleted it, but something made me open it. It was from Vanessa. "I'm sorry," it said. "I didn't know about the organ donor thing. I swear I didn't know. Mum told me you were just difficult, and that's why she was hard on you." I believed her. "I'm so sorry for everything. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know." I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to believe Vanessa could change. But wanting someone to be better doesn't make them better. And I didn't owe anyone my forgiveness at the cost of my peace. I deleted the message. Maybe someday, but not today. Today, I had a foundation to run and a life to build. A life that was fully mine for the first time ever. I walked to the balcony and pulled out an old phone from my pocket, the one I'd kept from before the accident. Eleanor's number was still in it. For years, I'd kept it out of obligation or hope. Now I held it for a moment, then threw it as far as I could. It sailed over the railing and disappeared into the night. Robert joined me on the balcony. "You okay?" he asked. "I'm better than okay," I said. "I'm free. Here's what I need you to understand. If people who should love you treat you as less, then you're not trapped. There is a way out. You are worth saving. You are worth fighting for. And sometimes the family you choose is better than the family you're born into. Don't let anyone make you believe you're disposable. You deserve kindness, respect, and to take up space. You deserve to matter, because you do matter. You always did. So here's my question. Have you ever been made to feel invisible by people who should have loved you? How did you find the strength to set boundaries? Share your story in the comments. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. And if this story gave you hope or made you feel less alone, please hit that like button and subscribe. Together, we can build a community where everyone knows they're valued. You're never unwanted. Sometimes you're just with the wrong people. And once you find your people, everything changes. Everything gets better. Thank you for listening to my story.